Hi there, everybody. I'm Mike LaPlante, and I'm the average wine enthusiast. You know, since I started doing these shows, I have found that I find something out about something I've said on a previous episode, and I think to myself, geez, I wish I could go back and add that into the show or maybe mention it on a future show. However, there's just too much information to put into one show and keep it down to a relatively small size. Sometimes I just find out that I got turned on to a wine and I want to share it with you folks. Well, that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to get this information in and maybe make a little bit of a shorter show. So the first thing I wanted to straighten out, as it were, is the fact that in the varietal show, I had mentioned that Zinfandel and Shiraz were both originated from another varietal altogether, and their names were changed. They got moved to a new location, and that new location turned Primitivo into Zinfandel and Syrah into Shiraz. However, I just recently found out that Shiraz is actually a city in Iran. And it turns out that way back in the day, it was like one of the capitals of the wine industry way back in the day, like way back before North America was even on anybody's radar. And the interesting thing that I found out about Shiraz being in what at that time was Persia is that that area maintained its reputation, something like the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia or Napa Valley in California. It maintained its location for many, many years. Same with a lot of the vineyards in Italy as well, and France. So that right up until the Iranian Revolution in 1979, that there was over 300 vineyards in the Shiraz area that were flourishing. Things were going great, and then the revolution happened. And the people who ended up taking over the country was the religious folk there, and obviously Islam is the main religion in Iran, and so they turned the law of the religion into the law of the land, basically. And in the land of Iran, like I said, it's an Islam country, and in Islam, alcohol is forbidden. That's sad. But I guess I'm not having very many Muslim YouTube watchers taking advantage of this show. So what do you think happened after that regime got in? And they're still in power right now. Like, you know, all the Ayatollahs run that country. Those 300 wineries, they're growing wheat or corn or something. So it's interesting that New Zealand and Australia took Syrah and basically turned it into Shiraz, which is the name of a city where a lot of wine used to come from. I'm not sure what the status of Shiraz was in that time. Was it a result of the revolution that and the demise of the wine industry in Shiraz that caused the Australians and the New Zealanders to get rid or to make a rebirth of the Shiraz name and associate it with wine. And now for a segment we call Fishy Wine Labels. Well, recently I was given a bottle of wine. It was a wine that I had never tried before. Relatively inexpensive too. At the LCBO it only goes for $14. On Vivino I think it says there's an average price of $8 US, I think. So a relatively inexpensive wine. It's out of Spain, and the varietal is known as Mencia. It only grows in Spain and Portugal. And since I never heard of it, I was obviously very excited to try it, but even more excited because the vintage was supposedly 2012. So that is a 7-year-old bottle of wine, and I don't know if you know this or not, but wine gets better with age, generally speaking. And it was for $14 in the LCBO. How can that be? The last time something like that happened to me, where there was that old of a bottle of wine on the shelf in the LCBO, it turned out the wine had dry cork. The wine was never laid down and never stored properly. That was in 2017. I think I bought a bottle of Viennese Alianico, I think it was. Might not have been. It was from that winery, the Viennese winery, which is out of Niagara. Not impressed with their customer service, I'll tell you that much, because I had another bottle that had an issue with it and they never really got back to me. It was a bottle that was never carried in the LCBO. I got it right at the winery. So be wary buying bottles from a winery if in case there's something wrong. There's not much recourse you have after that. So anyway, like I said, a little leery about a 7-year-old bottle of wine just on the shelf for $14 in the LCBO. You just don't see that vintages like that for that price too often. But I was willing to give it a whirl, give it a try, and so this wine is the Signorio della Antigua. And it says it's Mencia, and it says it's Finca Cabanela. That's the Cabanela farm. And in English, it says this wine is made using only the finest grapes coming from our 25 hectares of vineyards. That's a very small patch of land, 25 hectares. And supposedly this wine is part of that. However, something that kind of throws me off. Well, there's a couple things about the label, and we know that fishy stuff does happen with wine labels. I forget what the wine was that I had mentioned before, but there was a review on the back that was written a couple years after the vintage of the wine. So you're sticking labels on wine after the fact, after the vintage that you're saying is in the bottle. Makes it hard for us to believe that the vintage is what you say it is. So yeah, so this is 2012 supposedly, and it doesn't say it anywhere on the actual label, by the way. But I want to say 7 years ago, this practice right here, which is becoming so common, these little things that look like they're stickers that they put on here. No, it's actually part of the label. They just put a little foil there inside this label. The foil is right there too. So that it's supposedly Wine Spectator gave it a 90. I assume that Wine Spectator may have given it a 90 because they were using their name on a wine bottle that is sold in the LCBO, for one thing. It's not just a mom and pop store. Hey, you want to buy some wine? So I don't think 7 years ago this was a practice. I'm guessing that this label was put on much later. But then there's something I've never seen before. So there's no marking of the vintage on this bottle anywhere, but there is a stamp, an actual stamp. What year do you want this wine to be? Well, let's say it's 2012. And it's a stamp, and it has L14LM, like that's some kind of code or the stamp of the person who verified this was 2012 vintage. I don't know. And it was $14. So there's so many things about this bottle of wine that tell me that things aren't as they seem. Anyway, so that's this week's update. Hopefully I do much more of these things where I turn you on to a bottle of wine that I think is good, or find out some information that could possibly supplement something I said previously. Having said that about this wine, I'm just thinking it was very good wine. It was something that I had never had tried before, and I wasn't sorry that I did try it, and I will definitely look for Mencia in the future, you know, just to compare it. Yeah, in fact, I went back to the liquor store and bought another bottle because the bottle that was given to me, I drank it. That's going to do it for this update. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and thanks to the Big Organ Trio for letting me use the music for this show. Till next time, I'm Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. Salute!